Hello, welcome to the stream. Good evening, everyone. I'll just fix up a couple small things. How are you guys all doing? Catherine, good evening. You guys enjoying your holidays? Anything interesting happen? Or like, what are you excited or nervous about going back to school? Feel free to share in the chat. Hello, Josh. Mildus, not quite afternoon, but I guess it's a matter of perspective. I'm doing good. I just finished my bone surgery rotation, and so I have emergency coming up. So I'll be in the emergency department following the doctors, seeing the patients there, which is pretty exciting. Yeah, new haircut, thanks for noticing. Alright, we'll wait a couple minutes, I think 8:35 maybe, and then we will get started. And where is the YouTube? Here. This is the actual setup and the topic we're covering. Okay, we'll give it 2 more minutes and then we'll start. Angela, hello, welcome. Yeah, nervous about English. English is a pretty intense subject. Like, people tell you how important it is and how it doesn't scale, which are both true. And I think it is a subject that can be easy to be nervous about. So hopefully today helps you guys out a bit, at least on the argument analysis side of things. We'll give it 1 more minute and then we will start. Oh, the other thing is, give me a sec. I have a, whoops, let me, I'm just going to pop a link in the chat. So I've decided to make a Google form just for you guys to fill in after, whenever you feel like it. Just any topics you'd like me to cover, or any like feedback on the sessions. I'll just pin this at the top. Feel free to fill that in if you've been to previous lives or after today's live as well. But I'll probably post it in the YouTube community place as well. Alright, pinned it. Alright, let's get started then. So, welcome. There are 1 week of holidays left, and so I think it's good you sort of gather yourself. Did I get some kind of message? Yeah, gather yourself and really think about what you want to achieve with the last week left. Because you have a solid amount of time, but also you really want to feel ahead before you head into term 2. I think I pinned the wrong one. Give me a sec. Yes, that's why something weird happened. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Alright, let's jump into it. So, today we'll be covering how to analyze for argument analysis specifically. And thank you to everyone who sent in their pieces. I will show you guys the pieces that I received, and we'll be covering some topics that I'll be talking about, and I'll be using those pieces to illustrate certain points. Some updates on what's going on with the other videos. I have added timestamps to the last video. I did that straight after it, so if you want to check it out like the day after the live is done, hopefully I will have put the timestamps up. And yeah, it's a bit easy to navigate that way. And also, like I said, the Google form is pinned in the chat box. So if you want to send in any feedback, or you have particular topics you want me to cover, please drop it in the Google form. All right, and this was the quote we talked about for the past 2 weeks. And so hopefully you've gotten started on a lot of the tasks you wanted to start on. And yeah, that's that. And this is another one that I thought was pretty important, pretty useful. So this is Michael Phelps's coach, Bob Bowman. And this is one thing he puts in a lot of sessions that his swimmers do. And I think it's just a really simple phrase. School's about to start. Term 2 is going to be hectic. Term 3 is going to be hectic. But all you can really do is just do your work and just focus on what you're doing each day. Don't think too much, try not to get too stressed, but just put in a bit of work each day, and whatever will happen in exam day will happen. All right, with the structure of today, we have essentially 2 sections. So I'll be talking about what to analyze. So picking out what evidence should you be picking out, how much you should be analyzing as well. I think those are really common questions that students have, and also how to analyze those pieces of evidence in a way that is quite thorough. And throughout I will have different examples. I will be asking you guys questions, so please put stuff in the chat, say stuff. If you're wrong, it doesn't matter. And I think a lot of these are a bit subjective questions as well. All right, these are the pieces that were sent in. Once again, thank you to you guys, and I will provide some more detailed feedback afterwards. But essentially, these are the 5 pieces. I tried to summarize the contentions, so it's much easier for you guys to know what the piece was about. So one piece was about how changes need to be made for plastic recycling. Another piece was about how Earth's biodiversity is worsening. Another piece is about how Squid Game incites violence, ChatGPT spreads fake news, and there is a lack of action towards floods in Victoria. When I show these, I will put this contention at the top, so it will be a little easier for you guys to follow. Okay, and with questions, I'll try to cluster them. So once I get a couple questions, we'll like sort of stop the PowerPoint. I'll go to a different slide and we'll talk about the answers to those questions. Yeah, keep dropping in questions. Sure. All right, and this is some things that we won't be covering. If you have questions about these, please DM or email me, but also I may be covering these in future live. So image analysis is one we won't be talking about today, and also structural things. So like, how do you construct a good intro? What should you have in your intro? How should you write good topic sentences? And how to chunk information. So thinking about how to break down your body paragraphs. Those things we'll be talking about in another time. So today is purely analysis, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a good idea of what good analysis looks like, and also where you find good things to analyze. Okay. First section, what should you actually be analyzing? So I'm very keen to hear what you guys think. Do you want to drop in the chat what things you guys look for when you analyze an argument analysis piece? Good. Thank you. Hey, Scarlett. Appeals, yes. Good. Okay. Yeah, all very good points. I think I phrased my question kind of wrong, like exactly what you would be looking for. But yes, so effect on audience statistics, tonal shifts, appeals. One thing my teacher told me about tone is that argument drives tone. That's a really important point. So she kind of told me that you shouldn't really go by tone when tone changes to frame your body paragraphs, more when argument changes. So when the person's argument change, that's why they change their tone, right? They say to myself, okay, like you're arguing with someone, right? You might be like, okay, I kind of want to make them feel like butter up to them a bit, so I'm going to change my tone to a softer tone. You don't really say, okay, my tone's been a bit loud, let's change it softer. And then so I'm also going to change my argument. So argument drives tone. But yeah, those are really good points. So in my mind, there are 3 things that you always analyze. And these are the 3 things. Titles, always. The last body paragraph, so whatever piece of evidence might be in the last body paragraph, I think you should always analyze it. and images always. So the reason for this is titles are often really, really good. We'll go through some examples later, but they're usually, because they need to be catchy and they need to be in newspapers and stuff, they usually have really good stuff in them. And I think it's a really good way of starting off that first body paragraph. The last body paragraph often also has really good sort of techniques in there. And also it is a summary of their points, or maybe a call to action, just something really strong to end on. Okay, images. The reason why images are so important to analyze, and you should always analyze them, is because images are the most sat section of any exam. Someone was telling me this, but essentially argument analysis is the most sat section, right? So English is the most common subject, the most students sit it. Out of the 3 sections, argument analysis is the same for everyone. So it's very, very commonly sat. And out of argument analysis, people might pick different types of quotes and whatever, but everyone analyzes the image, or everyone should analyze the image. Most people, because the image is really obvious, right? Most people will analyze it. So it's also important that you really nail that image analysis, and we'll be talking about that in a future live. But these 3 things, I think you guys should really try and analyze. Hey, Socrates. Yeah, titles is an interesting one. All right, we're going to have a look at a couple articles. These are all ones the students wrote in response to. So have a look at these, and if you guys want to, I think this is a good one. What do you guys think about this title here? So you'd analyze the title. While you guys pop what you think about the title, like what is interesting about it, you can pop in some analysis or just some thoughts about the title here. But here, like if you look at the first body paragraph, I could probably put some stuff in there, right? We built more dams. Dam. Like that's kind of a, what do you call it? Like a play on words. I think there's a term for it, but I don't remember. And the picture, you would have to analyze that as well. But yeah, what do you guys think about the title? Good. Yeah, sure. Exaggeration, generalization. There's one other interesting point about it. I'll just say it, I think, is that it's kind of like the national anthem, right? So Australia, the land of the young and the free. I think that's the way it goes. But instead of that, it's the land of droughts and flooding rain. So it's kind of a play on that, which I think is quite interesting. So once, like a really good technique, right? If we look at this is part of the same sort of piece, but it is a, yeah, sure, juxtaposition with the national anthem. This is a part of the same piece, but sort of a secondary section, like damn wrong, more dams, not a solution to Murray-Darling Basin floods. So the idea of damn wrong is a play on words, which is also like a really good technique, right? So you see the title is really, really ripe for you guys to analyze. Negative connotations creates an association between Australia and extreme weather. Right, which is exactly the point of the whole piece. So titles are good. Here, recycling plastics requires changes that are drastic. This is a little less sort of as interesting, as juicy as the other ones, but it's still a really strong statement, which outlines basically the idea of the whole piece. So recycling plastic requires changes that are drastic. So a really firm statement, and drastic is a strong word, obviously. All right, next piece, how Squid Game is desensitizing us to violence. This one is also like just a very strong statement that highlights the point of the whole piece. And you have that image there as well, which you would definitely analyze. And plus, if you look at the last paragraph, like I said, the 3 places, title, image, last paragraph, it can be difficult to guide ourselves against gory and inhumane violence, right? Really strong language you could analyze, but it is crucial that children gain moral guidance from trusted individuals rather than be blindly influenced. So this is kind of the whole contention. So a really important point. So we have violence, but how do we solve it? Because we need to guide people. So this captures the whole contention, has good, strong language in it. And also that really firm last phrase, shaping our future leaders' understanding starts with us. So putting the responsibility on us, and this really grand idea of shaping our future leaders' understanding. So all really broad strokes, important information. And you often see these in those 3 places that I'm talking about. Hello, Jeffrey. Welcome. Okay, so we mentioned the 3 places you should be analyzing. Next, something I get asked a lot is like, what should you actually analyze? So there are a lot of possibilities you could analyze, and the other thing is like the balance of normal evidence plus fancier evidence. Like you might identify some techniques that you feel like a lot of people wouldn't be able to analyze, or some really sort of niche points. And it's like, how many of those should you pick? Should you just look for those, or should you look for kind of strong things that you think a lot of people will pick out as well? Vivian, hello, welcome. So I'd like you guys to have a look at this piece. I hope you can see it on your screen, but just have a look at any quotes that stand out to you, and any quotes that you think like don't really stand out to you but seem kind of alright. If you have any quotes that you think are interesting, please pop them into the chat. Are there any cool, phrases, any particular techniques here that you think are like that's really ripe, really layered? Wimley, hello. Just pop it in the chat, anything that stands out to you. Doesn't need to be good. I agree. Sad dose of reality. Anything else? Just drop them in the chat. There's honestly like no pressure. I'm not sure if you guys aren't writing because it's pressure or because you're tired, but sad dose of reality. Yes, we all have a role to play. Yes, just to really like, putting the responsibility on us, making everyone feel like it's their job. Plastics are barely recycled. Yes, good. So you have the stat, you have the word barely. We are the top global gobbler. Yes, global gobbler, the alliteration. Thanks. There's a lot coming in now. This is not sufficient for success. Yes, good. So gone are the days. Yep. Which is like kind of a sad, reminiscing kind of phrase. Very good. All right. So yeah, I put one down, but there are a lot more. I think I just didn't complete this slide. All right. So I'd like you guys to have a look at the piece of analysis that someone wrote for these, and I'd like you to have a look at these quotes. What do you think about these quotes? So exact same piece we were just looking at, I think around the same area, which was the start of it. But what do you think about these quotes that this student used? Let me move my chair up, actually. Like you can be critical with what you say. You don't need to be, you can be critical with what you say. Or you can be, just be honest with it. What do you guys think about the quotes in this piece that this student picked out? Yeah, good. I agree. So, yeah, good. So, with these quotes, I think you do need these kind of quotes in two forms. I think I put it on the next slide. We'll switch between the last two slides. So we have these kind of two slides, right? So one, I think the quotes this student picked, a lot of stylistic ones. They're ones you might be able to use in your intro just because you can put a quote in just kind of naturally. So you might say, in the intro, in light of many supermarket giants such as, quote, Coles and Woolies. And it just puts a nice little quote in, gets the ball rolling, which is fine. And like you guys have said, a lot of them are quite like statements, right? Like the problem, or 13% is all right. But yeah, the problem and Coles and Woolies, I think, are the sort of kind of ones that kind of say things that are there. There are some good quotes here. So the sudden pause was a sad dose of reality. Red Cycle is also just the name of the place as well. But I like the satirical use of something with the asterisks. So I feel like this student could have used more quotes that were some of the ones we talked about a bit earlier that would be a bit more impactful. So good, you guys picked up on that. Yes, and you can see that what you start off with also impacts your analysis, which is why we're starting off with what should you analyze. Because if you pick Coles and Woolies, even someone who's like really good at analyzing can't analyze that much. Like the only thing I get out of it is that, it's like a very casual phrase that people use. So it uses Woolies, not Woolworths, which I feel like might bring it closer to home. But yeah, it's just doesn't make it easier for yourself. Could pick up more intense quotes. All right, so what do you think? What do you guys think about these quotes? This is on a separate piece, so I put the contention at the top just a reminder. So this piece was about biodiversity of Earth is worsening. This is on a sample VCAR piece. So I think the VCAR website is down. I don't know if you guys have been on yet. I tried to find the piece, but the website's down, so I wasn't able to get it. But that's the contention. So what do you think about these quotes? Decent. Sure. Any other thoughts? No? So in my opinion, these are really good quotes to use. Yeah, descriptive, good. I feel like this student could have used more quotes because, as you can see in the a lot of the middle part, there aren't. Yes, good. In the middle part, there aren't that many quotes. So I feel like the student could definitely use more, whereas the student before, I think, uses probably enough quotes. Maybe one or two more. But yeah, the quotes here, in quality wise, they are really good because they make you feel something, right? Distinct saline smell. Hauntingly, there is no sound. We must take action before it is too late. They make you feel urgency, they appeal to your senses, and so it makes it a lot easier for you to analyze because this student talks about the sibilant alliteration. Coles and Woolies, there is no sibilant alliteration to talk about. And, hauntingly, there is no sound. The striking brevity. We must take action before it is too late. Stressing such necessity gives you things to talk about. Yeah, Max, is that your name? Yeah, questionable quote density, I agree, but very good quotes to pick. So you kind of want these kind of quotes with some other ones dotted, placed within, sprinkled within as well. And the final one on quotes, I think. What do you guys think about these quotes as well? So you see it is a bit hard, right? In an ideal world, you have lots of good quotes, you have a couple okay quotes, and that's your essay. That's an ideal body paragraph, but it's really hard in practice to actually do that. Actually, I think we'll skip through this. But yeah, you can see for these ones, the quotes are kind of stating things, right? Squid Game For You page on TikTok. They're like kind of statements. Yeah, they're kind of like statements. Worldwide, 111 million views, sure stats, but there could be more quotes and probably some more sort of stronger quotes in here as well. And this was the actual piece, and some quotes that I picked out are, the buzz is inescapable, this first sentence here. The anecdotes tricolon of whether you're overhearing friends, chatting with friends, scrolling through your For You page, gripping. So I think there were, condensed towards end as well. There were more quotes that could have been used here that could be added to what the student has here to make it a lot stronger and just a more thorough paragraph. Admittedly though, I think for the student's paragraph, they analyzed the image for it, which means like less of it is spent on the actual piece. And I think a lot of the earlier info is background info as well. Like, initial game of red light, green light cause, like this is just a plot summary of Squid Game. So you can't really analyze much here. But I still think some more stronger analysis would be nice. Okay, we'll move on to this last part. Should we do? Yeah, okay. We'll do these last couple of slides before how to analyze, and then I'll answer some questions as well. So we talked about balancing normal and fancy evidence. We talked about the 3 places where you should analyze. Finally, you need to give context to your quote. So you need to quote enough of it so that whether it's satire or referring to a certain place or company or whatever is obvious. Yeah, I think it's hard to tell yourself, but if you read your friends' pieces, sometimes they might quote things that are different to what you quoted. But from your friend's quote itself, you don't actually know like what the quote's referring to. So they might say, the phrase green and glossy incites a sense of disgust in the reader. And you read that and you're like, what exactly are they talking about? What's green and glossy? So you really need to give context, and you want the examiner to think as little as possible. You want them to read your analysis and be like, okay, yep, that's exactly what that's talking about, and that's the impact. Easy. You don't really want them to have to refer back to the article and look for the quote and check whether what you're saying actually makes sense. So have a look at this. This is the, no, it's not a similar piece, but yeah, this is the biodiversity piece, but just a different body paragraph. My issue here is more with imposing 3 successive rhetorical questions. He thus seeks to target corporate leaders and natural scientists, many of whom are quite likely to be in the same position as they were 10 years ago at the previous conference. Right, how do I know the 3 rhetorical questions are targeting corporate leaders? I'll need to go back and actually find those rhetorical questions, and by quoting them, it would make the examiner's life a lot easier. Because when I read this, I'm like, is this actually doing this? Are there even 3 successive rhetorical questions in the piece? So I would opt to quote these, but you can like sort of shorten them as you quote them. So that's my point with giving context to pieces a bit more. Yeah, like I said, the examiner needs to think more. All right, I'll answer a couple questions before we move on to how should you analyze information. Give me a sec. I'll just switch my slide. Okay, answering questions. So what were some questions we had? Do I still tutor English? Yes, I do, but I am full with this year with students though. Do you think lit charts and spark notes are helpful? Were they useful for you? I never used lit charts or spark notes, but for me personally, I was like, I felt I was decent at analyzing things. Like when I read them, I could have a good impression of them. Plus I had really good teachers, and I derived a lot of my contentions, a lot of my analysis from teachers. But I think they are definitely really good resources if you don't understand something, or if your teacher's just not really moving at the same pace as you. Is it bad that I did no work? I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you still have a week left, and if you really needed that week, whether it's a bad thing or not depends on whether you intended it to be a week of no work. If you said to yourself, I didn't want to work that week, and then you didn't work, that's fine, because you knew you wanted to rest and you rested. But if you sort of plan to do work, then it's not so much of a good thing. How do we find the main arguments in an article? I'll talk about that in a different live, but you can use the really big main argument, use the intro and the last paragraph for, and the title a bit. But for the smaller paragraphs, I find it really easy to go through each paragraph, think about what it's about, and when the sort of idea shifts, that's when I know there's a new main idea. A little hard to, it would be better illustrated with examples, but hopefully that helped you out a little bit. Okay, any more questions? Let's see. If I miss any questions, just pop it in the chat again. I don't intend to. Dark Cloud. Oh, I'm your favorite YouTuber. Thank you for that compliment. Do you have to explicitly state the persuasive technique that the author uses? You do that. I'll go into that a bit later when we go to how to analyze information, but you do it if you can, right? If there's alliteration, if there's metaphor, but if there isn't, like there's no nice technique name to it, you still want to describe it. So you want to say like through the short sentence, right? That's not a technique, but you can describe it, or through the emotive language of, or through the through the attack on the reader's like self-esteem or something. But you just want to describe it if you don't have a neat word for it, but you generally do want to talk about the persuasive technique the author uses. Could you give an example of what fancy evidence refers to? Sure. Let's hop back to that page I was talking about. Fancy evidence was, I think this one. Yeah. So lush jungle, saline smell, hauntingly there is no sound. So these quotes that you can just feel are really ripe for you to analyze. There's so much to talk about, right? Distinct saline smell. You have that appeal to the senses. You have that alliteration. And I feel like having those two, quite strong layers to the quote makes it sort of fancy technique or fancy analysis. And with fancy, fancy evidence. That's what I mean. Struggle to find. How do you make analysis sound better? Like, how do you learn more vocab to replace common words like show? So a lot of that is practice, right? It's when you write a practice essay, you put in effort to not use show. Because when you really think about it, you're going to use show so many times. Every time you write a homework piece, every time you write an exam piece, you're going to use show. So it's really worthwhile pushing yourself to find new ways of saying it. Of saying highlights, draws attention to. Through this, he demonstrates. Through this, they find that. Or through this, he impels the reader to believe. Using these phrases, like once you have a list of them, or you've used them and pushed yourself to find them, you can apply them to any argument analysis piece. Does your analysis have to cover everything? No. So I'll talk about that a bit later as well. I think I have some general tips. Did I? Yeah, but it's better to analyze less than more. But you kind of want to have an even spread of the piece. So some at the middle, some at the start, some at the end. You don't want to have all your evidence from one part of the piece. But you don't have to cover everything because you wouldn't be able to finish that way. And what should you do if you don't know the word to describe the tone? That's hard. You just find the closest word you can. So you should have a decent enough vocab that you know, like generally like good, bad, like the basics, right? You might not find the perfect fancy word for it, but you kind of want to find the word that's okay. And you also want to, the way I think about tone is what emotion does it sort of drive in you? So is it a tone of fear? Is it a tone of sympathy? Is it a tone of anger? So I feel like thinking about how you feel when someone is reading it to you, or how the person who wrote it intends it to be like spoken towards you, that will help you with describing your tone. Have you got vocab lists? I do not have vocab lists for analysis. I had a decent vocab, I think, building up to year 12, and I feel like lists and memorizing them didn't really help for me. What really helped for me was just writing and trying to think of different ways as I wrote. Because if I feel like if I write a list, I feel like I don't need to use the words immediately. So that strategy doesn't work for me, but you can definitely try that, and there are definitely lists out there. All right. Vivian and Angela, I will leave your questions for a little bit. I'll go through some of the next section and then I'll come back to these questions and ones that will follow. But yeah, thank you for your questions. All right, let's hop back to the PowerPoint. Like, I'm going to get to all the questions, don't worry, and if I don't, you can always message me. All right, how should you analyze information? So remember the next slide very, very carefully because it is what you should be doing. 3 things: what, how, why. Some people call it the ABCs, some people call it the ABCs, but what, how, why. And what are those 3 things? What? The literal quote itself, okay? How? Why do we care about the quote? Or like what's nice about the quote? So is it alliteration? Is it a really short sentence? Is it an imperative? Is it an order? Is it a call to action? And this is often missed, right? Students often say the idea that, or the author's statement that we need to do something now impels the readers to rise to action, right? But it's more like the fact that it has an imperative feel to it, or the fact that it sounds like an order or a command, or you could focus even on the word need. So the use of need in the phrase, we need to do something now. So how is often missed, and why is the impact on the audience and how it contributes to the author's contention. So you might say, through this, the author establishes their authority and so leads the audience to believe them more. I think more it's actually impact on the audience. So what exactly is the impact on the audience? Are they making them, more scared? Are they making them more trusting of the author? Those things are the why. Okay, and you can rearrange the 3 bit in your analysis. Obviously, you don't really want to do what, how, why in that order all the time because it's going to be, your sentences are all going to sound the same. You're going to say like the author's statement that blah, 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 has this, blah, 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 which does this, blah, 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 blah. So you want to switch it up a bit. But first practice on incorporating all those components for essentially every quote you have, every quote you pick, apart from the ones that are like for style or like statement quotes. But essentially you want to put these 3 in. Constant referral to the target audience. Yes, that's the why. So you'd be doing that for essentially every quote. So it would be constant. You'd be constant. And specificity, really good pickup. I will be talking about that in later. It's one of my general tips. But yes, you want to be as specific as possible. So saying things like reader, if it's a newspaper, or saying things like viewer, if it's a news transcript or something. Or if it's a website actually, viewer or reader would work. But yes, specificity. All right, let's have a look at a couple examples. So have a look at this slide. What, how, why. Keep it in the back of your mind. Okay, what, the quote. How, the strategy. Why, the impact. So let's have a look at this slide here. I'd like you to look at these 2 quotes and try and think in your mind, what's the what, what's the how, and what's the why. And you can pop it into the chat. You don't have to do it for both sentences because there are quite a number of quotes in there, but you can pick one of the quotes And I'd like you to tell me the what, how, why, or maybe if they're missing one, what they're missing. I'll give you a bit of time to do that. It's quite good to really think through it yourself. So out of the bolded ones, if that wasn't clear. Thank you, Mildus. What? The quote? Yep. How to make the imagery more poignant. Why? Because it enhances the imagination, renders the image far more alarming. Good. Samuel, what is making the imagery more poignant? How is the sibilant alliteration, and why is to render the image far more alarming? So what is the quote itself? So it's not making the imagery more poignant. That's probably part of the how. So the how is the alliteration, and also making the imagery more poignant. And what's the effect on the reader? Why? Yeah, to render the image far more alarming for the reader. Excellent work, guys. So I'll just go through these really quickly. As you can see, he sort of did the why. This is kind of the how as well, but the why first, and then the sibilant alliteration is clearly the how. Distinct, salient, smell, the what, and then you have a bit of a why afterwards, right? Far more alarming, enhances the imagination. Okay, and for the other quote, you see he kind of does it for two quotes, or this student does it for two quotes. So further underpin. So that's kind of the why. There was a sort of theme beforehand that the student's continuing upon. Striking brevity is the how. The quote is hauntingly there is no sound. And this, the what, isn't exactly quoted. So that's one thing they're missing. But the tricolon of frogs, beetles, and birds. And the tricolon would be the how here. And the why would be, this idea that was further underpinned. All right, hope that helps. Here, this one, can you guys identify the what, how, and why? Actually, for this first one, this first bold sentence here, can you tell me if any of them are missing? You don't really need to do the what, how, why all the way through, but what do you think any of those are missing in this sentence? Or could be done better in this sentence. So think about what the what is, what the how is, and what the why is. Samuel says the why component. Anyone else have an opinion? Same opinion? Different opinion? I don't mind. Yeah, so I agree with both of you. Well, not both, there's three of you, all of you. So I think the how is what's most obviously missing in my mind, right? Like chatbot, there's no real description of what's nice about it. You can argue that provokes dissociation and separation from artificial intelligence, but I feel like that's more a why. So I feel like I'll give you some examples of hows afterwards, but I feel like that is a bit missing. And the why I think can be clearer. I think one thing this student can work on is kind of expression. So the why is, evokes a sense of preformed neglect for ChatGPT in journalists. I'm not too sure what sense of preformed neglect means. So I feel like that phrasing could be a little clearer. And for this second sentence, the what would be the quote, the how would be sort of the bombardment with phrases, and the why would be to instill the notion of fiction being present in the stories portrayed in the media. Yeah, I think bombardment counts as a how because it's a strategy. All right. I'll answer the questions after we get through this what, how, why part. I'll answer some more questions. Yeah. So with this first quote, the conscious choice of Bell to describe ChatGPT as a chatbot, I gave some examples of a how, right? The belittling description, just saying, it's a chatbot, or the mechanical moniker. So sort of making it seem more robotic. So ChatGPT sounds, or gets rid of any sense of the fact that it's a robot, but by explicitly mentioning the fact that it's a robot. So that could even be the how, by explicitly mentioning how ChatGPT is a chatbot. So those would be examples of how that could have been used here. All right, and the what, how, why here, I think this is the, let's see. Yeah, this is the last example. So I would like you guys to give me the what, how, why of any of the quotes in these bolded sentences. So the last example of what, how, why, and then I'll answer some questions, and then we'll go on to the rest of the presentation. And if any what, how, why could be improved upon or is missing, please let me know as well. And another reminder that this piece is about the lack of action towards floods in Victoria. Just so you have a bit of context, you know what the whole piece is building towards. Why is missing from the first one? Sure. Any other thoughts? She attempts to unify the readership. Yeah, I would say that's the why. Rex, you had your sack already for argument analysis. I am very surprised. But I'm here for the exam, I guess. This is definitely before your exam. I know that at least. Okay, so from Manira, what is the Wilting Gardens? Where is that? Yep, Wilting Gardens. How to use drought-related language. Great. And why to establish tangible effects of drought on Australian citizens. Yeah, so I would argue that is the why. So the why is kind of like, why the heck has the author used it, right? What's the purpose? They want to illustrate an effect. They want to have the audience, feel something or see something. And here I think if you sort of add the phrase to the audience, it might make it more obvious that it's the why. Establishing the tangible effects of drought on Australian citizens to the audience. So I feel like that's a pretty well done why, and the what and the why, what and the how are clear as well. In the second one, you have the what as the literal quote itself. So that's Australia, droughts and flooding rains. The how would be the two blunt sentences, and the why would be to unify the readership and to establish the country's long-standing history, whatever. So hopefully that's clear with you guys. What, how, why. When you write your own pieces, try and think about whether you're incorporating these. hopefully that helps you out. All right. And yeah, so like I said, the order doesn't have to be the same. So how here, semantic field of desolate drought related language. Semantic field, if you guys don't know, means like a bunch of words that are related to the same thing. So semantic field of dogs would be like poodle, Doberman, King Charles Cavalier, or the semantic field of robots might be like metal, aluminium, artificial intelligence. No. Yeah, wasn't a good example. But semantic field means a bunch of words that relate to the same thing. So the how is first, the what are the quotes, the why, tangible effects. The next quote here, the why is done first, unify the readership, what, and then how. So switch it up a bit, but make sure you try and incorporate all three sections. All right, before we move on to this general advice, I'll answer some questions. All right. I think we stopped at Angela and Vivian. Yeah. Vivian, do we have to find arguments and state them in our first sentence in our body paragraph? Yes, that's the way I did it. So a quick intro to topic sentences, so first sentence of your body paragraph. I followed an I approach, which is idea and intended impact. So I talk about the idea I'm going to be focusing on in this body paragraph. So essentially, the idea that the author has throughout a couple of their body paragraphs. And then I have the intended impact. So the author aims to establish how quickly the situation is worsening in order to, from the outset, highlight to readers the imminent danger that artificial intelligence brings. That might be my topic sentence. So yes, I do think you need to state in your first sentence the argument. Angela, and also your whole body paragraph builds towards that argument as well. So if you have a good one, it makes your writing a lot easier. Angela's question, how can you improve if your teacher isn't giving relevant feedback or isn't teaching properly? Do you know any good resources? So I guess that's part of what I'm trying to help with. Good resources, if you have people who do well in English in your year level or people who have done well in the past in your school, I think those people particularly will have some really good advice for you. But I think, just really going through your own resources, looking at some good essays for the text that you're studying, looking more deeply into analysis yourself, I think that would be probably the best way. So it's a bit unfortunate when things like this happen. YDD, one thing I find annoying is constant referral to the target audience. Oh yeah, I think I talked about that already. Yeah, target audience. Also, they don't want to read something generic, right? When you say author, try not to say author too much. Try and say like he or she or they and the author's last name. It just makes things seem a bit more lively than you're just using language that's like really technical and boring. Pointing. The why component. They could have expanded it more. This doesn't Okay, Angela, when in Sachs, I don't know what to write for how it positions the audience. I always resort to it positions the audience to feel a certain way or incite change. So that's in my general advice. Did I talk? I did talk about that. I'm not sure if it's up first. So I'll just answer it now. You just be more specific. So like I said, you don't say like audience all the time. You say readers. So incite change for what? Even if you just say incite change to stop the littering in the schoolyard, or to incite change to stop the council from implementing this plan to destroy some apartment houses. Even adding that phrase that's just, a bit of a recap to your text is really nice. Makes it a bit more specific, makes it less repetitive. And also be careful. It's not always to incite change, right? Oftentimes you want to identify the more subtle contentions as well. So whether it is to build rapport with the audience, whether it is to instill a sense of fear or a sense of urgency in the reader, or whether it actually is to incite change. So changes often might be the really broad one, but you can identify some of the subtler whys as well. Okay, you guys had your SAC for it. That's really odd. So you had your creative and your argument analysis in term 1. So for me, I think my argument analysis was in like late term 2 or even late term 2, I think. Is it necessary to analyze or even reference tone in each BP if there is no tonal shift? I think tone is just a nice add-on. So if you feel like the language sounds really aggressive, then say it in an aggressive tone. and acknowledge it when it seems important. But I don't think it's something you have to put in, because it wasn't really something I focused on. Once again, pay attention to your teacher. If your teacher loves tone, then mention tone a lot more. But in my opinion, it's more you mention it when it contributes to the how. So the aggressive tone sort of helps the quote itself. On topic sentences based on the argument or persuasive technique. Based on the argument, because I wrote my body paragraphs by arguments. So I would group a couple of the actual piece into my body paragraph, and that couple paragraphs would have one argument. They wouldn't have one technique. So I wouldn't do it by techniques. Should we shape our body paragraphs mostly around the quotes that support the argument? Because you've picked a bunch of paragraphs that the first 3 paragraphs, which all contribute to one argument, all the quotes should kind of fit that argument. So just find the good quotes and they will definitely tie into the argument because they're in those paragraphs. Do we have access to the PowerPoint? Is it possible for you to share a list of synonyms to positions? I can. The PowerPoint, I will try and share it. I haven't worked out how to do it yet, but I'm happy to share it. And is it possible for you to share a list of synonyms to positions? I can just come up with some on the top of my head, but I think it's really useful if you try and think of some as well. But after the presentation, I'll see if I can do that. All right, let's move back to the presentation. So, general advice. I have some more, but we'll start off with these 3 and look at some examples. So 1, decide how important a quote is and dedicate the amount of time you spend on pieces of evidence accordingly. So we looked at what fancy evidence or what stronger evidence looks like. We looked at what more like statement-like evidence looks like as well. So you would obviously spend more time on the evidence that is a bit more fancy because it has more to talk about and it will gain you more marks. If you spend 3 lines talking about a quote that's just the name of it's just Apple Store, there's not that much you can glean out of it. So it's really important you spend your time accordingly. 2, analyze less rather than more, particularly in SACs and exams. A lot of people get really perfectionist when they get into the SAC. When they do the first body paragraph, they analyze every second word, and then you run out of time. You lose out on really good quotes that come on later in the piece. I would much rather finish 10 minutes early, and I've analyzed all the important quotes and missed out on some of the minor ones I didn't want to talk about, rather than spending a lot of time at the start, having to rush later on, and kind of finishing, but not really being purposeful with what I'm picking. It's a different issue altogether for your take-home essays, because you want to be analyzing as much as you can. Because at home, that is when you are exposed to things like statistics, like alliteration, like building a report. That's when you see all the techniques, so that when you get into the actual SAC or exam, it's just analyzing stuff you've done before. You make it more specific to the text, but it's all things you've analyzed before, right? Similar ideas. Because people always do the same thing. A lot of the articles are all showing how the author's credible. Most authors want to do that. They want to get the reader to do something. Most authors want to do that. So in home essays, you want to expose yourself and analyze a lot. Finally, be very, very specific to the text itself. That's what we've been talking about a lot. So you guys had those as your questions, which were good. So trying to stay away from things like audiences or text or image. Text, newspaper, article, online comment. Text, I said text. Image, instead of image, picture, illustration, cartoon, drawing. Any of those are a bit better and just elevate your piece a little bit more than the very generic terms. So I'd like you guys to have a look at these quotes that I've bolded, and what do you think about them? Do they show specificity towards the text? Let me know what you think in the chat. No? Do you want to expand upon that? Peritum? If the article has many persuasive, yeah. I'll analyze those questions after this section. If you're nervous about putting something into the chat, like honestly, don't be. If you're nervous about this, the end of your exam is going to be a nightmare. But I think if you're tired, then maybe that's a bit more understandable. Yeah, so I think it's a bit of both. It leans towards not being specific, right, on audiences. There is some specificity, like underage audiences or, adolescent readership or teenage readers. I think some of those are good, but it could be a bit more specific overall. So it's negative impacts on, on teenagers or something like that, whatever it's talking about. And for things like, substantial consequences or, negative impacts, you can use those a bit, but you can also mention a bit more specific. So remember, this text is about Squid Game being violent. So you might say, illustrating the violent consequences or highlighting its, violent impacts. What's a better word than violent? It's bloody, maybe? Yeah, something like that. But some more specific language would be nice. And particularly this sentence here. This affirms the writer's knowledge and expertise in current trends and deems their arguments as more valid and trustworthy. Here's a really good test for you guys whenever you write a sentence in your piece. Can it be used in any other piece? If so, it's probably not that good of a sentence. This sentence here could be used in a lot of pieces. It could be used in many argument analysis pieces, essays that you write. I could literally take it out, copy it, paste it into another essay. So you want to avoid things like this, and you want to make it a little bit more specific to the text that you're studying. So, firstly, who is the writer? You can mention their name. And like valid and trustworthy, that's what a lot of writers want to do. So you could say this instead. Through drawing upon specific examples of Squid Game's popularity, Ilias both highlights the pervasiveness of Squid Game and also demonstrates her keen awareness of the exact forms in which young people are being exposed to the vastly attractive Squid Game. So I expand upon the fact that, sure, she wants to show knowledge and expertise, but knowledge and expertise in what? So what are the actual current trends? Well, the ways in which young people are being exposed to Squid Game. So that would be more specific. Yep, Yowani, good variety of audiences. Better specificity. Yep, good. All right, and this audience, we don't have too much left, so bear with me. What do you guys think about these audiences? And a reminder to anyone watching, I've pinned a comment in the chat. Any feedback, any reviews you guys have, suggestions, that's a link for you guys to send that to me. You can also message me as well. So our answer is very broad. Any other thoughts? I'll wait for a couple more and then we'll talk about it. Like, I don't really mind if you say it's broad. I don't really mind if you say it's not broad. Like, just say what you think and why you think it, and that's fine. Good, the audience changes from Australian to Victorian, which probably isn't a good sign. So is it good or is it not? Is it not good? I don't think that's a massive problem. I feel like a broad audience isn't necessarily that bad. So yeah, thank you guys for all your suggestions and for actually, for like putting your thoughts in. I think the broad part is a little confusing. I think the actual audience for this piece is like Australian citizens. So like, so you kind of have to write Australian citizens. It's broad because that is the broad audience. So if the Prime Minister's making an address, the audience is Australia. It sounds broad, but like it's literally Australia. So I think the audience here is actually decent because you have mention of Victorian, Australian citizens. Could be more consistent, but yeah, could be more consistent. In readers, particularly her fellow Conservatives, I thought that was nice. And also, yeah. Try again to cover some nuance by addressing a specific demographic. Although they follow up the readers as her fellow Conservatives. Could be a little more specific. And yeah, so I think it's varied. I think that alludes to the sense of audiences as well. Like you can switch up audiences because different parts of the author's piece might focus on different audiences. So you might have them targeting the government, might have them targeting the company, might have them targeting the normal everyday kind of person. And that does happen a lot in articles. So yeah, good discussion of this one. I think when I read it, I thought the audience was decent because you have mention of Victorian and Australian citizens. And I think just that little bit more specificity than saying audience is quite good. As to some of the other language audiences you could pick, I think that depends on the actual contention. So who the author is actually targeting. And I haven't read the piece enough to know that. Yeah, I'll address some of your questions about this piece. Could they talk about progressive or conservative? Yeah, they can. Aryan says the main target ones should be ones who are affected and people who will attempt in dealing with it. Like, if you're writing a piece about how there's a lack of action towards something, you're probably not targeting the people who are suffering from it, right? Like, you wouldn't be saying to people whose house is flooded, you wouldn't be saying like, there's a lack of action towards your house being flooded. And it's a bit questionable whether they would be targeting people who will attempt to deal with it because they're already going to help, right? They're probably part of the audience, but I would say the main audience and one that could be a little bit more specific in this piece are like people who, haven't really thought about it, or there's probably no one who's against it, but people who haven't really thought about it, or perhaps the government who aren't doing much about it. So I'd say those are the main pieces of evidence. Broadens overall, but they will have sub-arguments. Yeah, good. Very good. So yeah, certain demographics like we discussed. All right. Before this last section, so just these two things and then a couple examples, and then it's basically the end. I'll answer a couple more of the questions that you guys had in the chat. Let me find, where do we get up to? Okay, yeah, I think Aryan's one was the next. Yeah, so the questions, Aryan's question, pictures often have multiple nuances and their arguments, making it difficult to analyze the picture under a single topic sentence. How do you deal with this? I usually don't put an image in its own body paragraph, so that means I don't really need a topic sentence. But I also do think that pictures usually contribute to one idea, because if you send me an example, it'll be better to illustrate, but it always ties into the main contention of the piece because that's the whole point of it. So I haven't really found it difficult to analyze it under a single sort of idea. Let me go to the PowerPoint. I'll find one of the pictures and let's talk about it. So I think this ChatGPT one was good, right? Oh no, okay, we use the flooding one, right? So there's not much nuance here. You can pick out a lot. So you have the cow, which is almost drowning, kind of might allude to the fact it's in rural areas. So I haven't read this article that thoroughly, but perhaps it's a rural area. You have the house drowning in the background. You have the lack of people, the greyness, the fire danger rating, which shows, I think, sort of a lack of awareness because it's flooding and the fire danger. But that all ties into the idea that floods are really drastic and there's neglect towards it. So I feel like it should come in pretty neatly with each other. So hopefully that helps. But if you have a specific picture that you think wasn't that neat to talk about, please send it to me. Happy to talk about it. If the article has many persuasive techniques for an argument, how many would you recommend analyzing per paragraph without going overtime in the exam? The questions like this are good to think about, but because every article is different, it's much better if you just complete your pieces and have a specific article that you think this is a problem for. Because I can't really give you a number. But the main point is that you want your analysis to be well spread throughout the whole piece. So as long as that's the case, as long as you don't go over that, like you don't overcommit to one section of the text, then you can analyze however many persuasive techniques there are. But it's much easier if you have a specific piece that you think this is a problem for, and we can talk about. Okay, from Banana Bread, whoops. Even though I spent time going over relevant sentence structures for common devices, I found in my stack that it was difficult to even use some of them because I felt like I didn't have time to sit there and try to recall these more appealing phrases. So I felt my analysis become quite bland. I don't know if you have any tips. So I think there are two issues here. One, I don't like memorizing. I never memorized anything in English apart from like quotes and stuff, but I didn't memorize like sentence structures. I think it's fine if that works for you, but it seems the issue that it doesn't work for you, either for the fact that the strategy doesn't work, and I'll talk about some different strategies you can use, or maybe it's the fact that you didn't like start learning them early enough so that they were hard to think about in the actual SAC, or maybe you didn't like do too many timed pieces under pressure, so then you weren't used to coming up with those sentence structures under pressure. So those are my, if this strategy works for you, then you can try just starting a bit earlier, trying to do it under time conditions. If this doesn't work for you, I really recommend like just being more fluid. When you write practice essays, when you write homework essays, don't have a pre-prepared set of sentence structures there and just slot them in. Try and think of them on the spot and try and think of ones that work. And I guess a good sentence starter I like to use is through. So if you want just a nice structure for your sentence, you can say through and then the quote and then what happens after. But analysis, it's really hard to pre-memorize analysis or memorize analysis because the analysis needs to be different and specific for each text. All right. Did you personally aim to have more than one target audience in your pieces, Darren? It depends. It's not a goal. Like you don't need two target audiences. If there's just one, there's just one. But I do like to specify. So I might say the primary audience of, Australian citizens and the government. Like usually there's more than one. And if there is one and it's really broad, like Australian citizens, it's good to say that. So Australian citizens, and try and specify a little bit just to make it sound a little better. So I think 2 is actually a decent goal, but it's not a necessity. Catherine's question, my teacher says that we should always have a broad audience and not be specific because those techniques can apply to everyone, such as reader instead of something like teenagers. Is she wrong? I think in your intro, you can have both. So have your broad audience, Australian citizens or parents or whatever, just put in every audience you think is relevant. But with specific analysis, it's going to be targeted towards certain people. So if like in the flood one, I'm saying like, the government should not be doing this anymore. Like I'm not going to say it's targeting readers, right? It's definitely targeting the government there. So I think keep it broad in the intro, but in your piece, especially when the quote is very directed, you can pick out specific audiences. But obviously go for what your teacher wants for SACs and that, and just, like I always say, if your teacher likes your work, you're going to get a decent mark. Peter, welcome. Hey, did you end up getting the piece? Yeah, this is the VCAR website. I did not check the VCAR website after about like 4 or 5 p.m. So I'm not sure if it's back up. But yeah, the session worked well without the sample piece. Thank you. And how'd the footy go? Catherine, how did you practice for the argument analysis? Do you write all your pieces in exam conditions? No. Like I say with English, you should always start by writing some exploratory paragraphs and essays. So you're getting acquainted with the text, you're getting into the groove of analyzing. You shouldn't jump straight into timed pieces because they're only good for time. Like they're only good for putting yourself under pressure. So do that much closer to the SAC and to the exam. So for argument analysis, exactly what I said. I started off by doing some pieces at home, typed them out, taking my time, trying to analyze a lot, making them really long and thorough. And then closer to the SAC, I do more practice pieces. But also for argument analysis, I feel like once you're good at it, each piece is quite different. So what I spent time doing was also practicing reading time. So looking at the piece, trying to think about how I would split it and think about some techniques I would use and think about my intro. So who's my audience? What's my context? I would try and write my intro in my head as well during reading time. So once I was pretty happy with my writing, I would just be practicing kind of reading time on different pieces, because that took less time, but also like it's very good time spent. It's time well spent. Do you think it's a good idea to keep mentioning the image throughout the piece? Probably not. I don't think so. I think it's just like another quote. It's like, it's just like another quote that's a bit more hefty. If you analyze it well, you move on. Because it's not that useful if you mention it later on. Vivian's question, do you think it's a good idea to keep... Oh, whoops. I just answered that. Mildus, should images get their own paragraph? Up to you. Usually incorporate it in my mind, unless they're like a completely separate idea. Usually the way with images, I try and find a quote that leads really nicely to that image, like literally describes it or has a similar idea to it. And then I use that quote to link me into the image. So I would say this idea is heightened through, or this idea is carried through with, or this idea is brought to life, or the reader can better visualize this idea through the illustration of. And that's my slick connection into the picture. No worries, Banana. Do VCA ever use political articles? Because if seems they stray away from political topics, while Sax often use. Maybe your school's just... No. Yeah, so, I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? There's no point. Like, why would they purposefully pick a politically contentious article? Because, like, VC is a big deal. You know, there are news articles about it. Parents care about it. State cares about it. Schools care about it. So they wouldn't pick something that's a bit of a sensitive subject. But once again, like that, like knowing that, keep that in the back of your mind, but it doesn't really change how you prepare for it. Druva, is there a specific way that you structure a paragraph, or how many techniques you use in your paragraph? I structure it by topic sentence, and then literally like analyze the quote. So what, how, why, over and over and over again, and that's my paragraph. How many techniques? I hesitate to say, because I really don't know, but like a good couple, and it would be pretty well interspersed. So let's have a look at the pieces. We're going to jump back to the picture. I'll come back to some of the questions a bit later. Let's go back to here. I'll show you guys. So the quotes we were talking about earlier, let me see if any of the pieces were similar to what I had written. So, okay, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 2 or 3 more quotes in here, and that would be kind of my paragraph. So this one has an image analysis here, actually. That's why there are not as many quotes here, but probably 2 or 3. So you just want like 1 every 2 or bit sentences. And however long your paragraph is, then however many quotes you should have proportionally. Cool. All right. Let's jump to the last part then. So we talked about being specific to the text. Everything ties into the contention, so be very careful when deciding that. Same with topic sentences. Everything in your body paragraph ties into that topic sentence. Everything in your piece ties to your contention. So when deciding your contention for your intro, be smart, be broad, but also think about it very deeply. Be very confident with it. And a good way of checking is asking yourself, do a lot of the evidence in the actual piece contribute to that contention? And with topic sentences, you can keep it broad, right? You don't really need to focus on one idea. So remember, idea plus intended impact if you can't. So if you think there are really 2 ideas in these couple body paragraphs, then you can mention those 2 ideas just so it's easy to refer back to within your body paragraph. And finally, have your analysis enhance the quote. My teacher told me that argument analysis is a place where you can kind of show off a bit more with your language. Use language that's a bit fancier and might not be as concrete as your usual language, but is, just sounds really nice. And you can use that to enhance your quote. So if your quote's talking about, actually, I'll show you the example on the next page, and you guys tell me what you think. So what do you think about this quote here? And how the analysis contributes to the quote? Okay, I guess, Peter doesn't need to be anonymous. Peter's one of the past students, or he's the only past student out of the ones who sent me their pieces, but he scored very highly in VCE, 99.95, and his piece is the biodiversity piece, so the Earth's biodiversity. We'll have a look back at it and talk about some of the questions that he mentioned in the comments. And thanks for joining. And if you guys have any questions as well regarding like general studying, hopefully Peter can help out as well in the chat. Can you put quotes back up your point? Okay, I answered that a bit. But yeah, let me know what you think. This last sentence here, does the analysis amplify the quote? Does it work with the quote? Or work with the author's idea? Oh, whoops. Okay. Let me move myself. Okay, I've moved it properly now. This is not oral presentations, Francis. This is argument analysis. So what do you guys think? Yeah, good. Thanks for that, banana bread. We'll see if anyone else has an opinion. Argument analysis, which sack is this for? It's for the argument analysis sack. You're in year 10, yeah. So one of the sacks is argument analysis. You probably will start it in year 10, where you get like a news article or some kind of persuasive article and you analyze it. Great. So I agree with banana. And if you look at the quote, right, if you look at the actual analysis, amplify, global fame. So that's what the quote is saying, or the author's idea. The author's literally saying it's popular, like Squid Game is popular. But this student really makes that even stronger. And that's what you want in argument analysis. You want to show how the author's being effective, and that you do that by making your language reflect the author's point. So you're sort of like the author's number one fan, if you want to think of it in that kind of way. So to amplify the global fame, undeniable influence, widespread popularity, all words that are really strong and are almost things that the author would write, right? And that's what you want in your analysis, especially with really strong analysis. And yeah, you can compare with this phrase, which is true. Furthermore, Ilias highlights statistics of 111 million views garnered worldwide, which highlight how popular Squid Game is. True. It's all factual, but it doesn't really, the analysis here doesn't heighten the quote and doesn't really do the author's view justice. So compare popular with undeniable influence, widespread popularity. The language you use in your analysis matters. And just to show you an example of a place where language really matters and people go a bit overboard, this is an example of a dinner menu. If you guys have seen, let me move my head back to where it was. But if you guys have seen like dinner menus, you know that they make you hungry, right? They go into a lot of detail about things. So if you look at this, topped with Parmesan cheese, spaghetti tossed in a smooth, rich and slow cooked black Angus beef. They could have just said spaghetti with beef, but they put so much detail in, right? Melted golden cheese, like it's just like yellow cheese. Or you have, let's see, what's another example? Yeah, served warm with butter. Fresh bread of the day served warm with butter. Like it's literally just bread with some toppings, right? But the way they write it really highlights the really accentuates the delicious part of the food and makes it sound really, really nice. So that's exactly what you guys want to be doing with your analysis. So you have the quote, you want to make it really pretty, make it really strong. So think of this menu. This is a restaurant called George's, by the way, in Camberwell, if you guys ever want to go there and if this menu appeals to you. Cool, hopefully that helped. And I will answer some questions. Let's keep that menu up and I'll answer some of the questions you guys have. Where did we get up to? Political articles, specific way. Ah, Peter, we'll talk about your piece. Whoops, we'll go back to the... So, in Peter's piece, let's find that. Biodiversity. Was it this one? Yep. Anaphoric. Oh, I only used some of the body paragraph, so I'm not sure whether you used anaphoric. What was it? Tricolon anaphora. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. The main thing is you would hope that the examiner knows what it is. Otherwise, I feel like if examiners don't know something, they'll either be impressed or not like it, or just ignore it. So, yeah, but it's a good example of that kind of fancy analysis. So you would mix that in with your normal analysis. So yeah, it's a nice phrase. Oh, your teacher roasted the essay so hard. Yeah, I think I tried to put in some Ing Lang terms in my one, and I think my teacher just said like, you don't need to. Like there's no need. Just do the English stuff well. Putting the Ing Lang stuff will confuse the examiner, and is just no need for that. All right, let's go back to the questions background. When mentioning audience, you just write the audience. Just mention the specific audience. Like instead of saying audience, just say readers all the time. And when you want to be a bit more specific, you can say younger readership, or you might say, readers who are less inclined to believe the reader's viewpoint, believe the author's viewpoint. You can add things like that, but try and change your default from audience to whatever the slightly more specific audience is. So readers, viewers, or people in the audience, or people attending, something like that. Yep, Yowani, good. I agree with you. Angela, I agree with you. Is it in English? It's in English. Matt, hello. Welcome to the live. And yes, hopefully I will be keeping up the videos. I have no clue what will be happening in a few years' time, but I'll just focus on creating some videos, next week and the week after. Do you have any good examples on argument analysis? Oh, yes. I have a video out on argument analysis. A couple. There's one where I go through my own essay. Yeah, there's one where I go through my own essay. Please check that out. I think it's very, very useful. And that video did quite well, along with the videos where I went through my comparative piece and my creative pieces. So I think people found them useful, and hopefully you guys will as well. YDD, no worries. Oh, SW. Nice. I know Shang, yeah. Hello to him as well. I hope he's enjoying medicine and enjoying year 2. Peter, maybe not in the piece, but use a lot of that stuff in other pieces. Yeah. So if people don't get it, so his fear is that, the teacher's fear is that the examiners wouldn't get it. And yeah, like you can put a couple of those in, but if you put a lot of them in, then you won't get the mark that you could get if you used more sort of grounded language. Normal English. Matt, do you have some general things that the examiners wouldn't like in an essay? So you want me to make a list of things examiners don't like? You can flip a lot of the things I've said around. So like non-specific analysis. I think they really don't like non-specific analysis because it's all just pre-memorized stuff. Same with your text response and comparative. If you kind of use the same intro all the time, then often they can tell that it's kind of boring, kind of doesn't stand out, and everyone's going to write the same thing. Apart from that, making examiners think a lot. You don't want to make them think too much. You don't want to make them question everything you write. So like, does this quote actually do this? Is this quote even in the piece? If you're making them think a lot, they get tired, they don't trust you, they're not going to give you that high of a mark. So hopefully that helped a little bit. If you want more examples, I can try and think of some. How do you analyze when there is more than one piece? So you analyze, in the exam, you don't need to compare, at least in my year. You guys can confirm if you know for sure, but in my year, we don't have to compare in the exam. So you just analyze the first piece, move on to the second piece. Do you do anything timed for creative? Yes, because our creative was timed in class. So I had to practice some timed pieces beforehand. Vivian, is it necessary to use big words and phrases in the exam? Will I lose marks if I don't? Like, can I be simple and clear instead? Yes, don't choose between the two, right? You want both. You want what's comfortable with you. You want clear language, but have some nice words, nice phrases as well, because they will really accentuate your work. So don't go for either. Right? Don't say to yourself, I want to make it sound really fancy. And don't say to yourself, I want to make this really simple. Opt for it to be clear and efficient and have some, nicer words and whatever in there as well. Tips for the GAT. Just watch my GAT videos. They will help you out a lot. My big tip is that to just do a practice one and spend a lot of time on it. Try and find quick ways of doing questions. And you can plan or write the writing tasks. So my biggest tip is to prepare for it and do it thoughtfully and efficiently. So doing it once through, but being very smart about it. Can you lose maths? Oh, can you lose marks? The font's a bit small on my computer. Can you lose marks on spelling? Yeah. I mean, if your spelling is abhorrent, you would lose, it's pretty reasonable you lose a mark. Because that ties into making the examiner think. Imagine you're the examiner and you're reading a work that is messy and there's a spelling mistake every couple words and you need to work out what the word says. You would be really annoyed. I would be really annoyed. And as hard as you might try to not let that cause bias, you probably will. And spelling directly reflects English as well to a certain extent. No, I did make spelling mistakes in mine. When I write quickly, I sometimes miss letters or sometimes write words twice. That's pretty funny when I read my work again. But those small things are okay. You don't want it to happen too much. Banana, do you use Google Scholar for text analysis and comparative for sample essays? I don't. I've heard of Google Scholar. Try it out. If it works for you, then go for it. Yeah, unique ideas. Sure. And it's good for people to have ideas that you can build on. JC, welcome. JC was my editor for a while as well. I think end of 2021. He got into medicine in year 2. No. Yes, it's very impressive to be in medicine at the ripe age of 8 or 7. What's with the face on the door? Oh, it's just me from a while ago. I don't know where my parents had it from, but yeah, it's just nice to have on the door. Are dictionaries useful during English exams? They're useful if you don't know what the word means, but don't use them as a thesaurus. Like, you should try and do that now. You're in this live now. I'm telling you now. Try and prep a bit before the end of your exam. You don't really want to be using a thesaurus at the end of the year, but you can use it if you don't know what words mean. So they are semi-useful. Audrey, hello Darren. This is related more to math methods, but in your VCE years, were you introduced to pseudocode? Because now we have to incorporate a bit of it into every topic. I don't know what pseudocode is. Does anyone know and can help Audrey out? I don't think it's part of the curriculum unless it's a new study design change. Angela, if there are 2 pieces in the exam, if you don't compare and integrate both pieces together, will you score lower? Okay, like I said, with my exam, literally didn't have to compare. So I just didn't compare it. So I don't think you would score lower, but check if that's still the case this year. Curiosity, hey, this is a little unrelated to the title of this video. However, I was just wondering, what subjects did you study? Oh, that's fine. So I studied English, Inglang, Methods, Spech, Chem, Chinese, Latin. Those are the... Oh, thanks a lot, Banana. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Curiosity, Francis, Discord. I've had people ask me about the Discord. Once again, I haven't had too much time to make one. I also don't know how to make a good one. But it is something I've thought about, but I haven't felt that it's a necessity, so I haven't made it yet. But once again, if you really want me to make one, like send me a message, let me know. If a lot of people want it, then sure. Pseudocode, yeah, pseudocode, no one. If anyone has any input, please. Who was asking about pseudocode? Audrey. Yes, please how about Audrey? Oh, Wimley? You do pseudocode as well? Okay. Oh, okay, yeah. Then I guess it would be useful. What was the question? Yeah, so I wasn't introduced to it because it wasn't in my study design. But it seems like you guys have to do it, which is a bit interesting. How to get better at deep analysis? Yeah, so just practice. Like literally practice. And what I mean by practice is when you do your homework essays, put in effort. Right? Try and actually go deep with your analysis. Try and extend yourself. Because that's how you get good at it. That's how you, like, if you've never done it in the past, you're not going to be able to do it in the exam. So you get good by trying to push yourself to do it, receiving feedback from your teacher, going deeper. So try over-analyzing things, right? Even something really simple, try and think about every little piece of analysis you could talk about it, and then you can sort of taper it back from there. But you kind of want to try and analyze everything and think about it really deeply to begin with. Dragon, my teacher stressed to keep honing in on specific audiences. Can you just keep using the same audience throughout? Do you need to emphasize audience effect throughout your piece? Oh yeah, I see those symbols coming out. They're like love hearts and emojis. Are they a new like YouTube thing? But it's nice. Yeah, thanks for popping them in the chat. Can you keep using the same audience throughout? So, like I said, the general audience is going to be the same for your entire piece, right? It's going to be like the readers or the Australian citizens or the people present at the ceremony, whatever. But as you have specific analysis targeted towards certain people, so some of the quotes might be towards the more reluctant people. Some of the quotes might be towards the government and complaining. Usually you don't really have pieces entirely targeted towards the government. Part of the piece might be towards the government. So you would mention the government as well. So you do cater it towards specific audiences when necessary. So my answer is to change the audience as needed. And you do need to emphasize audience effect. It is literally the why. So you want to be doing that a lot. Dadu VC, very, very good question. Catherine, how would you structure your essay if it's 2 pieces? So for the exam, you just do it. Like you do maybe 2 paragraphs. So I write 4 to 7 paragraphs, usually 4 or 5 paragraphs. So depending on the length, 2 and 2, or maybe 3 and 1. If it's in a SAC and you do need to compare, you essentially analyze your first piece maybe in 2 paragraphs, and then the last paragraph, I analyze the second piece whilst constantly comparing back to the first piece. If your teacher has a different strategy, like comparing throughout, then go with that. But that was sort of my approach for the SAC, and then the exam was a different issue. What do you think is the biggest separator between an excellent and a decent essay? I would say probably the quality of analysis, because as I've said, you analyze so much, right? Literally you have quote analysis, what, how, why, so many times. So if your what, how, why gets a little bit better, then your whole piece gets a lot better because you do it so many times. So I'd say that's the main separator. Their what, how, why is a little better. They do the how a little more. They target the why a little better. So that's probably a good separator, I think, that you guys can work on. What are your thoughts on using ChatGPT to get feedback? Yeah, I think that's fine. Go for it. I haven't used it before, so I can't comment on the quality. But I think if your teacher's not that good, then sure, go for it. And he'll probably correct some grammar stuff. But also, like I always say, trust yourself a lot as well. So when you're looking at ChatGPT, some of the stuff it's saying, you might think it doesn't really make sense. And that's fine. You can discard it. How to get better at creative? Teacher feedback is the main one. Because creative is really different from like school to school or person to person. But yeah, looking at good pieces, emulating the author's style, but teacher's feedback is the main thing. What do you reckon I should do in the holidays? I have a whole live on this. Please watch the live. It was the live last week. I go through a lot of the subjects. You should consolidate first, review first. Don't really start on new things unless you're really confident with what's been happening. Or if you just want to like freshen up a bit, do some new topics, but you really want to ensure that what you've learned up to this point is sitting pretty well in your mind. Would I suggest ChatGPT for homework? That's a good question, GC. I reckon ChatGPT is quite good for info. So if you don't know something, or if you want to find out more about like, should blah, blah, blah this, or like, what did Shakespeare mean by this? Those kinds of questions, yes. I do not recommend it for your entire homework assignment because you get nothing out of it. like it doesn't even matter if ChatGPT does a good job or not. But you personally, you don't grow as a person. You don't really extend your writing skills. You don't extend your analysis. So I don't think you should use it in that way. But definitely as an aid, sort of like a quicker Google, I think. For section A, I've been told that it is really important to have unique analysis in order to stand out. Would you agree? Yeah. I mean, unique analysis always stands out because it's unique. But you don't want to make your whole piece unique. I think because Women of Troy, it's just the same idea, how like it's saying that there's hope in war. So everyone's going to kind of write that, but you just want to describe it more deeply or add a bit more detail. I have a lot more quotes for it that you analyze well. So if you ask me what analysis can I make straight up, it's a bit hard because it's an entire play. But I guess with Astyanax, like you have some good juxtaposition in there. Cassandra, you can find some good quotes, and probably use your language to heighten the quotes. I would say that's probably better than trying to find analysis that no one has ever written before. Yowani, after the language analysis sack, how many pieces would you go through the year up until the exam? So we finished pretty early at Scotch, so I had a pretty good amount of time before my actual exam. So I didn't do any argument analysis until my comparative was finished, which was the last sack. And then I did 3 full practice exams, so 3 argument analysis. And then I think maybe 2 or 3 more just timed by itself. But I mainly focused on section A and B from memory. Manura, no worries. Thanks for coming. Matt, should you go into the creative section having memorized certain story? Oh, because you guys have a creative section in an exam now. That's a different issue. I'm not the best person to ask on this because I didn't have that. But with the SAC, I did memorize certain sections. I didn't do that well in it because I did the wrong kind of preparation. But because at Scotch, we were told the topics. So we were told like, these were the topics. We're going to pick some of them to be on the SAC. So I would definitely memorize, right? Because you know the topics beforehand. Thinking of a new plot line on the spot's really hard in any scenario. So at least you should have some kind of good idea to before heading into the exam. Catherine's question, do you make a to-do list every day? No. I did do it a bit in year 12, I think. Just when I had a lot of things I wanted to tick off. When you feel like you're a bit overwhelmed, perhaps, or if you just have a whole day of free and you just want to make sure you sort of list out the tasks you want to get done. You want to plan out your day a bit better. Go for it. But me personally, I rarely make to-do lists, but in my head, like I know kind of what I want to do or what I'm like not prepared for. Angela, how do you weave the author's views and values into the piece? Is this argument analysis? Then you probably do that you do that throughout. Like when you see a good quote that reflects the author's value, you do that. And the author's view is the whole piece. So that should come through really well just with the whole piece. And values is rarely that important. Like the author values camaraderie. Like that is probably not going to be an important point in many pieces. Alright, good questions, guys. We'll see. If there are not that many more questions, we can end the live maybe at 10:15. We'll see how this goes. But yeah, hopefully it helped you out, and yeah, hopefully it was helpful. Peter, did I do 3 English practice exams? Alice only gave us 1, and it was like 2 weeks before the real thing. How did it work for us? No, maybe I did 2. No, I did 3. Yeah, I think I did 3. 1 was one our whole year level sat. So it was kind of like a compulsory one. 1 was one that we could have chosen to sat. Like, I think it was very, very optional. So I was just in a room with some other people and we just did it. But it was semi-school organized. And 1 was just completely I wanted to do a practice one before the actual SAC. So, before the actual exam. So I sat 1 at school, but just kind of independently. No one really. I think we were given the pieces and the teacher's like, just do it if you want. Oh yeah, Peter, feel free to share. How many like practice pieces do you do before the exam? How did you do a lot of essays, or what strategy worked with you? Dragon, is the best way to improve vocab just reading essays? No. Reading essays around your text is good for developing vocab relevant to your text. Actually, that's quite a good way, yeah. Because in year 12, you don't have that much time to like do vocab lists and learn a lot of broad vocab. What's more useful is learning vocab around destruction or around love or around conflict, whatever your actual text is about. And yeah, sure, reading essays would be part of that because you can gain a lot of vocab that's very applicable. All right, Samurai, there can be many ways to attempt a question in subjects such as methods and spec. How did you personally identify what was the best? Usually I just... That's a good question. I didn't have that problem too much. I think usually you go for the one that's the quickest. Or the one that you're most certain will yield the correct answer. So like if I only let you have one and I want you to be very confident with the answer, which strategy would you use? Go with that one. And definitely use secondary ones to check, either on your CAS or by hand if you have time. But generally try and really think about the one that is most likely to yield the correct answer, and also the one that kind of seems like it leads on from parts A, B, and C. Because sometimes in A, B, and C, they get you to find stuff, and then D, you could do it in a way that uses A, B, and C, or you could do a completely new way. And it probably makes more sense to use the earlier questions. Yeah, Matthew, I did not use vocab lists like I mentioned because my vocab was okay, like it was alright. Plus my teacher would give me good vocab. Like vocab wasn't a big issue for me. I think if your vocab is not that good, then use vocab lists, or vocab lists around your topic would be like a decent idea. So like kind of negative words or positive words or words around certain topics. But in general, your time is much better spent on analysis and on like learning the text better and on doing timed essays than like Quizlet. But yeah, you really want to assess your own situation and trust yourself. All right, let's have a look at Peter's answer. Hardest thing is figuring out the strategy of how you want to write. You had a blend of memorized ideas. So yes, by the end it was just tons of practice plans once I had the strategy down. Okay, yeah. So for Peter, I think he wrote a lot of argument analysis pieces, and yeah, and thinking about how he would approach A and B as well, depending on the topic. What was my favorite SAC? Probably the comparative or text response. Probably comparative. Text response I lost a mark, so comparative I think. I felt quite in control in my comparative SAC. Like I felt like I wrote a good piece. I really took my time because we had a long time for it. And I tried to maintain good handwriting as well. So it was just a very nice and polished piece. Angela, are there tones that can be used and therefore memorized in many contexts? For example, passionate. Yeah. But I didn't memorize them purposefully. It's more as I wrote. I just found that I encountered them more and more. But if you're the type that kind of needs more preparation, then sure, you can memorize some. It's really good just from personal experience. Like if you look at some pieces and you're like, what tone are these? Passionate. Okay, I have that in my bank. Next, it might be, in a very pessimistic tone, or in a many, what's a more, like cynical might be a common, critical tone is quite a common one. Yeah, it's more what you encounter and just making sure you sort of review the past ones that you've encountered. We'll just go into year 12, were you ever uncertain that you'd get an 8 out of 99.95? It wasn't something I thought about too much because I really just focused on each SAC and doing well in each SAC. So I try not to worry about that because that would come in December. We received our 8, I think December 30th. So it would come on that day or when the exams came or whatever. I tried not to focus too much on that. But I think towards the end of the year, people would ask me and stuff. And my response was sort of that I would need to stuff up really badly for 99.95. So this is the same for Peter as well. We both studied subjects that scaled a lot. And I'm not sure what Peter's past history, how he did in year 10, 11 or whatever. But for people who are like, you're decent at those subjects up until year 12 and the subjects are really good subjects and you're also good at English, like decent at English, then you need to mess up really, really badly to not get like 99.95. At least for me, I would have had to lose like quite a lot of marks in some subjects to drop that. Samurai, I've gotten stuck over the implicit complexity of questions and find it hard to hone in and answer questions regarding only essential info. Usually I would say in maths, they try not to overgive you info. So usually I find in math, they don't give you more than you need. But I think a good way might be to identify the relevance of each piece of info. So rather than getting a lot of info and being like, what's useful, maybe look at each piece of info the question gives you and think about its relevance and whether it's relevant. So like going through each one, that might help simplify things a bit for you. Angela, no worries at all. Thank you. And the race, do you memorize essays before SACs? I did not. Yeah, I memorized for the creative SAC because we were given the topics beforehand, but otherwise no. I kind of just knew the essays because I spent a lot of time writing them. So I knew my analysis, I knew my quotes, and I did enough practice essays to know that I had them well in my mind. And I would sometimes write out some paragraphs, but I wouldn't memorize them word for word, just the kind of general ideas, analysis, and quotes. Mildas, question for Peter and Darren. Were all your friends high achievers? Yeah, I'll be very keen to hear Peter's response if he is still in the chat. For me, my friends are my friends, right? Like, I didn't change my friendship group. Like, yeah, there's no like intelligence cutoff. Whoever I was friends with in year 10 and 11, we just kind of naturally moved on with in year 12. Of course, I would advise like cutting off some people if they're like a very negative influence on you. But I think it's good you have different types of people around you, right? You have people who do well, who push you. You have people who are just a bit more laid back as well. I think you need that. So I didn't really think about that too much, but yes, I did have a lot of high achievers around me, particularly because some of the classes I was in, like, Latin or like Spec, they're kind of people who, are decent at subjects. So they're in that class. What did Peter say? I felt the same as you, but remember I said MGS in previous years had SAC rank 1 getting 42 or 43 in English. Your experience seemed like English wasn't volatile at Scotch. English was, wasn't volatile. Yeah. English is generally okay, especially at the big schools, right? Because you have a big cohort and usually people do pretty similarly each year. But I guess sometimes it can be a bit surprising. Yeah. It's like a bit of both. Like in class, I'd be in classes with people who are like, really striving to do well. And you don't really need them like 24/7. You can if it's natural for you, but I think different types, and don't think too much about it. Race. For text response, do you come up with your own analysis or from online or both? I usually derive from my teacher and myself. So myself and then the teacher that thinks it's decent, I go for it. So like teacher talks about text, I read text, I have my own thoughts. I write a practice piece and put in the analysis that I've developed, give it to the teacher. Teacher says it's good, I keep it. Teacher says it could be improved upon, I change it a bit. And that's kind of how I develop my analysis. Some online readings as well can help develop your own analysis. Samurai, I've seen posts on Reddit asking if they should leave their less intelligent friends. Yeah, that is not a very good way of thinking about it. Less intelligent is not a good thing. It's not a good thing to discriminate for. It's much better to discriminate if it's like they, how do I say it? Like they're a negative influence on you. I would say that's a better guide of it. Like less intelligent is a very arbitrary and not a very good guide of things. Have I ever read Shakespeare? Yes, I have. We had to study Shakespeare in past years at Scotch. So Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, Midsummer Night's Dream. We had to study all of those. And Dragon, did you consider the maths or English subjects harder? I found maths harder. Peter, if you're still there, what do you think? Maths or English? But I found maths harder because you lose a mark. English, I knew I could write a good piece. At least overall a good piece. So I wasn't as concerned as maths. Latin Unseen's just from my teacher. I think there's a Latin Unseen book. Please send me a message, Matthew, if you're curious. I don't know what it's called. It's called like Latin Unseens, but that's not very helpful. I'll see if I can find it in a bit. But yeah, your teacher should give you a lot, hopefully. Otherwise, the VCI ones are decent as well. Okay, Peter found English way hard. It's just different. Alright, I'll give a couple more minutes and then we'll probably call it. Samurai, no worries at all. And see you later. Have a good week. Dorace, how many texts do you have to study for English? 1? No. 9 days, Women of Troy. And then 2 texts for the comparative. So 4 texts in total. English is subjective. Maths, if you know it, you know. That's it. Yeah, but I mean like maths, if you make a silly mistake or something. Like I just found maths a bit harder in that sense. And English, like I've thought that at least a good essay was a good essay. Okay, pros unseens for A level. Yeah, good suggestion. So Matthew, you can check that out. Peter recommends it. I think Peter scored 49 in Latin. And Audrey, so real. I have like a killer streak on all subjects. Okay. Seems like I'm in the minority here. I think maybe just I had a better sense with English than maths. Does high IQ correlate to doing better in VCE? Maybe. I don't know. I don't think IQ is something people should really think about. I think it's a bit arbitrary and not very useful. Like if you have a high IQ, you might get complacent. If you have a low IQ, you might get disheartened. So it's not a very good guide of anything. Alright, I think we'll call it at 10:25 then. Thank you guys for joining. And I'll just go to the last slide of the PowerPoint. Right, we'll give it a minute and a half and then enjoy your last week of holidays and yeah, complete all the things you want to complete before school starts. That's my biggest piece of advice. No worries. Dhruva, Wimley, Peter, thanks for joining. Dragon, Dandelion, Audrey, thank you guys all for joining. And I will see you guys. Have a good week.